let's work through this puzzle and see what we can learn, if anything extra, beyond just the sort of thing that you did on your homeworks. We have Gus and Sean. They work at the coffee shop. And each of them has the ability to produce some scones and some lattes. But each of them has slightly different abilities relative to the other. Sean can make 3 lattes an hour or 6 scones an hour. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So you can do either 3 lattes or 6 scones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 15. Okay. Let's call this Sean's abilities. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's for Sean. What do we call this line?
Production possibility, right?
Production possibility for 2. This is what Sean can do. So Sean could make 1 fewer latte than 3. He can make only 2 lattes. By giving up making 1 latte, he could produce 2 scones. That is the ratio of his abilities. That's the trade-off. You can give up 1 of these and get 2 of these. It's a ratio of 1 to 2. It's demonstrated by the slope of the line. Gus, on the other hand, can do 9 lattes or 9 scones. His ratio is 1 for 1. He has a 1-to-1 ratio of doing different things. So then, who has which absolute advantage?
Gus, right?
Gus has what?
Absolute advantage.
At what?
Both.
At both. Yeah. Anything you can do, I can do better. I can do anything better than you. Gus can do everything better. Now, that's not always the case. It could have been that Gus could have been good at one thing and Sean could have been good at the other. Okay? In that case, when they have different absolute advantages, it's more obvious which person has what comparative advantage. It's the same. Okay? But in this case, Gus has the absolute advantage over Sean in both categories, in both concepts. Let's first think about how much they could do in total. So if all that they made was just lattes, how many lattes could they make together? Well, 9 plus 3 is 12. And if all they made was scones, how many could they make? Well, 6 plus 9 is 15. So then we get a line that looks like this. And that is their combined comparative advantage, correct? Sure. Maybe. What would the slope of this line be? 12 to 15 is 4 to 5, right? Reduces to 4 fifths. 4 to 5. Can we do any better? Usually when we talk about the production possibility frontier, anything outside of the production possibility frontier is not capable of being acquired. We can't reach those places. But in this story, we can. Let me show you how. If we have Gus make all the lattes and have Sean not make any lattes but only make scones, then he's going to give up making 3 scones, and in exchange for making those 3 lattes, he's going to make 6 scones. By having Sean do that thing which he specializes in, I might not have drawn this perfectly to scale. If you're not persuaded, get some graph paper. Okay? And work it out. But we can get to a place that is outside of what would seem to be our production possibility frontier for combined, if it were a straight line, by allowing each person to do their comparative advantage. You see, from here to here, the slope of this line is the same as Sean's 1 for 2. Go over 1, go over 2, go down 1 over 2. Go down 1 over 2 more, right? And we immediately wind up outside of our production possibility frontier. What if we had done it the other way around? What if we had had Gus make those 3 scones instead? Well, then he would have had to give up 3 lattes to get 3 scones. We would have wound up here. We don't want Gus making scones instead of lattes. At least not those first 3. Are you with me? At least not until Sean's already made some scones. And so from here on down, from now on, it's Gus that's going to be giving up scones for lattes. And so we end up coming back down to the same point. This is the actual production possibility frontier for the combined efforts of Sean and Gus. Now, the more people that we add to the cafe, more workers, the more different kinds of comparative advantages we will discover amongst all of those different workers at the cafe. And each person will have a different comparative advantage. And if we assign each person to the job that is closest to their comparative advantage, we get more of a bowed out production possibility frontier. And when there's millions of people working in an industry, right, you can't really even see each individual. It becomes like one smooth line. It gets pixelated. You can't really even see it anymore. And so it looks like we have a smooth production possibility frontier. It's never really smooth. We're talking about real, concrete, individual people. But this is what it ends up looking like for the society. So we are able to improve our overall level of productivity merely through specialization, which is a glorious thing. It's a really glorious thing. Now, I showed you a little bit that they would be able to trade, but we need to get more into the details, more into the numbers. The way that we do this is we say, okay, what are their different comparative advantages? We'll start by saying, for Sean, the opportunity cost of one scone is how many lattes? Or we could similarly say the opportunity cost of one latte is how many scones?
If either one is 1.
For Sean, for him to get one latte, he'd have to forfeit or give up making 2 scones. To get one latte, he has to give up 2 scones. One latte is 2 scones. Then 1 scone is
1/2 of the latte.
1/2. It's the reciprocal. You guys remember fractions? Doing reciprocals and fractions? Oh man, not fractions, but yeah, fractions. Okay, it's the reciprocal. Now we would do the same thing for Gus. For Gus, the opportunity cost of 1 scone is how many lattes?
1.
1. It's 1 for 1 for him, right? So for 1 latte is 1 scone. And now what we're going to do is we're going to compare. The idea here is that when we ask about the opportunity cost of 1 scone, we're using lattes as a money. We're using lattes as money. Lattes is what you have to give up to get a scone. And in this world, there's just scones and lattes. So the opportunity cost of a thing is what you have to give up to get it. So in this model, lattes is the money. So if I'm thinking about who has a comparative advantage at making a scone, for Sean, the cost of a scone is 1/2 of a latte. For Gus, the cost of a scone is 1 latte. So the way we phrase this next thing is really important. We ask ourselves, for whom is a scone relatively less expensive in terms of lattes foregone? For whom is a scone relatively less expensive in terms of lattes foregone? And the answer is Sean. Sean only has to give up half of a latte to get a scone, whereas Gus has to give a whole latte. That's a whole latte to give up a scone. So then we would say that Sean has a comparative advantage in making scones. Similarly, we say, okay, for whom is a latte relatively less expensive in terms of scones foregone? For Sean to get a latte, he has to give up 2 scones. For Gus to get a latte, he only has to give up 1. So Gus has the comparative advantage in getting lattes. So they can specialize. As a matter of fact, they could even trade. They could trade. There's an opportunity for a market. If we want to buy a latte, right? Or actually, if we want to buy a scone, scones are, the quantity is usually put on the x-axis, the price is usually put on the y-axis. To buy 1 scone, if Gus wanted to buy a scone, how much would he be willing to pay for a scone?
1 latte.
1 latte. If Sean wanted to sell a scone, how much would he have to get paid to be willing to give up that scone? At least half a latte. So, it should be like a bracket, rather. So what price will they exchange at? What price will they exchange at? Any price between half and 1. We can't know. We can't know. But any price between the two would make them both better off. And so we could expect that there is an opportunity for trade that would make both of them better off. Are you with me? Okay. Now you had to do this several times on the sapling homework for the week. And if you haven't done it yet, that's great because you're gonna need this tool to do it. There was a really hard sapling problem. It had to do with Chris and Paul writing music. I put a hint up through an announcement last night to help you work through that problem if you're struggling with it. What else can we learn about the world by looking at this basic model? We could do the inverse of this. We could say, okay, we want to buy a latte. How many scones is it going to cost? And Gus's minimum willingness to sell would be 1, and Sean's maximum willingness to pay would have been 2. And so some price between the two would have been arranged. So 1.5 scones per latte. Okay. Whichever variable we put on the y-axis, once we're talking about an exchange, is the money. Or in economics we call it the numeraire. Which is similar to the numerator, but actually it's the denominator, so that's not helpful. It's the numeraire. It's the thing that we are using to make to count things. Notice, in this model, we're not exchanging, we're producing. It's important to tell the story right, and to remember which kind of story we're telling in every situation. In economics, what we do is tell stories, and the graphs that we draw are merely frameworks within which to make those stories clear. Production is how we go about satisfying our ever-expanding set of human wants. We go to work and produce in order to be able to consume. Production is the means Consumption is the goal, the final destination that we're aiming for. Production is the means, consumption is the goal. No matter what we are doing to produce, the goal is always consumption. Now, what are you going to consume? You can consume food, you can consume clothes, you can consume Netflix, you can consume leisure, which is doing nothing, right? Doing nothing is a legitimate thing to do. Sometimes you know somebody and you just feel like you would say to them, please, just don't. Now you can get to consumption by going directly to the land. So this is the story about plucking an apple from an apple tree and just eating it. You can go directly from land to consumption if conveniently the land hath provided. Or you could go directly from labor to consumption, from working to consumption. This is what a service is. Can you think of any services? What are services?
Barber.
Sorry?
Barber.
A barber, yeah. A barber is getting your haircut is a service. Okay. So somebody's doing something for you. The main thing that you're consuming is their time. Doing something for you. Being a doctor, primarily what's happening there is a provision of a service. Lawyers are primarily providing a service, although we might say that they're destroying things rather than produce. That's a bad word. Okay. Economics professors. The main thing I do is provide a service. You're going to walk out of here not with a thing, but maybe with some understanding, or maybe you just really enjoy my lectures. Now I can combine some land with some labor, work the land and help it to become more productive, pull some weeds out, mix my land with my labor, and achieve more consumption. Or I could actually give up some consumption in the short run. I could forego some consumption and use some land and some labor to put together some capital. By capital, I just mean tools or equipment, something that makes me more productive. If it makes me more productive, we say it augments my labor. It makes whatever I could produce through my labor bigger. So in the story online I told was about Robinson Crusoe making a net. He makes this net, and that helps him to be able to catch more fishes. And then he's clever and he figures out how to use that same net to help him be able to collect more coconuts. So he develops his capital. Now he had to give up some consumption in the short run because it took time. It took him some time to make that net. So he had to give up some consumption. Some of the time he would have spent catching some fish, some of the time he would have spent collecting some coconuts. He gave that up. He tightened his belt a little. He developed some capital. And now he's more productive than he would have been before. Was it worth it? It depends. Does the net work? If yes, then maybe. In the meantime, he gave up some consumption in the short run. If you gave up 3 fishes and 5 coconuts in order to get the net, and then the next day he's able to catch 7 more fishes than he would have otherwise, maybe it worked out. Maybe it worked out. If he ends up not being able to catch any more fish than he had before, he's just skinnier than he would have been. Does it pay off? What do we call it when something pays off? You put some money in the bank and it pays off. What do they pay you? Interest. So the return to capital or the payment to capital is interest. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering, so would that marker be capital? The one you're using right now? Like the marker?
This wasn't
No,
capital.
I'm saying like the marker in your hand.
Oh, the marker. Yeah, the marker is capital. It's a tool. It's better for you that I use this tool than that I just draw in the air. So it's capital. It's a tool. It augments my labor. It makes me more productive at what I do. When you go and get a job and they pay you, you call that money your wages. Right? Your wages. So the payment to labor is wages. And you own a piece of land and somebody else wants to use your land for a year, and you let them, but they gotta pay you, they pay you rent. So the payment to land is rent, the payment to labor is wages, the payment to capital is interest. By the way, suppose you own that land, somebody offers to pay you that rent, and you say, no, I'm good. Why would you do that? Maybe you don't like them. It's probably not a good reason, right? If they offered to pay you more, we might find out how much you really don't like them. You could put a price on it, couldn't you? You could put a price on how much you don't like somebody. That price would be how much they would have to pay you to make you overlook the fact that you don't like them. As a matter of fact, the person who is not willing to rent something out to somebody because maybe they don't like something about that person, maybe they don't want to rent their apartment to a couple of frat boys, they'd rather wait until a nice young couple comes along and wants to rent it. Right? If the frat boys are willing to pay more in rent than the nice young couple is, we might find out just how much this little old lady who owns the apartment doesn't like frat boys. Because at the point where she is willing to rent out to them, that is a measure of her preferences. Are you with me? Okay? Also, who does it hurt in the meantime? The person trying to rent out the apartment. She's the one who ends up being hurt because she could have, if she has to wait, she could have been making the money instead. Discrimination ends up harming the person who is being a discriminator. Because she's given up the possibility of getting rent. If she refuses absolutely to not rent it out, it hurts her. Okay. I didn't really mean to go all there. We got land, labor, capital. Is there any other input into production that's important? I'd say yes. What?
So when it construction be like time? Like
We can think of production as the creation of utility, wants satisfying capacity, and we can think of consumption as destruction of utility, using up wants satisfying capacity. Whatever that means. If that just means time, it just means time. If it means a hamburger, it means a hamburger. Whatever it is, using up that utility. The other entry into production that I think is important is the entrepreneur entrepreneurial talent. So the entrepreneur, the CEO, makes millions of dollars. It doesn't seem right. What does she even do such that she makes so much money? Why should she get paid so much? What is it that the entrepreneur contributes?
knowledge.
Knowledge, ideas, time, risk. We're going to get to risk in a minute. The task of the entrepreneur is sort of like the job of a chef. The chef is picking up from all the different ingredients available to them and trying to put together the best dish possible. And they're mixing together certain amounts of radishes and onions and celery to put together a dish that's just right, balanced, right? Now, all the actual food would all count as land. Land includes all natural resources. Then the entrepreneur has to hire the laborer, and the cooks, and the wait staff. And then the entrepreneur also has to hire the capital. Right? They have to rent the facility that they're going to use, buy the inputs into production, rent the stoves and ovens and chairs and tables and linens. Now, if you own the building that the restaurant is going to be in, and you're charging rent, you got a lease, and the entrepreneur pays that lease, are you ever going to get not paid?
No.
No, she's going to pay you. She has to. Even if she has a bad year, she's still gonna pay you. If you're a worker, an employee of the restaurant, are you gonna not get paid?
No.
You're gonna get paid. If you're the owner of the equipment that you rent out to the entrepreneur, are you gonna get not paid?
Mhm.
Or if you're the investor, are you gonna not get paid? You're gonna get paid. Especially if it's a loan to the bank, you're gonna get paid. The entrepreneur, however, does bear that risk, that potential of not getting paid. If they do get paid, what do we call it that they get paid? We call it profit. But they could also suffer a loss. And the entrepreneur bears the risk of potentially suffering a loss as compared to earning a profit. Now, which are you going to go into? Are you going to be the owner of land? Are you going to be a worker and hire out your labor? Are you going to be an owner of capital? What are you going to do? Maybe some mix of these. But you're going to take money out of your investment in land and put it into labor, to working more, if you think you can make more money doing that. You're going to balance your participation in the market such that you're making the most that you can. So we should expect that the payment to each of these different things is about the same. That the return on investment for each of these different kinds of methods of production is about the same. What do we know about the entrepreneur, though? What is their rate of return? Is it greater than or less than these other things? Yes.
I would say less than.
So the entrepreneur makes less. That's why they are an entrepreneur.
I would say less than because like they gotta give out so much money to like the other land, labor, and capital.
I mean, are you going to take a risk if you could just own some land and rent it out?
No.
No, we shouldn't expect that anyway. Right? Not a rational entrepreneur. Now, we expect that entrepreneurs, and we hear about entrepreneurs making extra money, lots of extra money. And they make extra profits. Why does she make so much money as the CEO? We hear that kind of thing. But if we just look at the business owners around here and go around and survey all of them that were around last year and are still in business this year, we should expect that all of them earned a profit. If they didn't earn a profit, what would happen?
They would be suffering losses and they wouldn't be around.
They'd be gone. They'd be out of business, right? So if they went out of business, would we be able to survey them? No. So if you go out and survey entrepreneurs that are still in business, that were in business last year, you'll find that their profits were really great. And it would seem like they make more money than these folks do. On net, if we actually count all the people that earned profits and all the entrepreneurs that suffered losses, should we expect that they got paid more or less than these folks? Turns out still a little bit more, but a lot closer to the same than if we only counted those who made profits. A lot of entrepreneurs suffer losses. How many restaurants started up and went out of business in the village in the last 5 years? Almost all of them, right? High level of churn through that place. It's common on areas close to college campuses too. However, we still expect entrepreneurs to capture a little bit higher rate of return than these other folks because they are bearing that risk, and also because the entrepreneur is creating new wealth in the world. The entrepreneur is doing something extra, something special. They are taking that risk and they're trying to make something new in the world. That chef created a new recipe that is better than all the other existing recipes in the world. They had to. In order to succeed, it has to be better than what already had previously existed. Otherwise, they would have suffered losses and gone out of business. You have to create something new and better. You have to take the same inputs and do something better with them, or you have to create something completely new using resources that weren't being used in the past. In order to get a profit, you have to do something creative in the world. And in the world, when somebody does something creative, yeah, they capture profits in the short run, but as soon as they start capturing profits, all the other business people in the world notice and imitate, and do the same thing as when they imitate, there's more competition, pushes the prices down, which means that that good thing that this entrepreneur invented and brought into the world, now there's a lot more of it available, and a lot more of us can afford it because the price is lower. All of the benefit of their efforts eventually flows to all of us in the form of surpluses in our exchange relationships. We get made better off, and it's not even all captured in the money. It's mostly captured in the quality of goods and services that we're able to enjoy. Did I talk about green beans in this class? No? You ever eat green beans? Yeah. You like green beans out of a can? That's the only way I ever had green beans as a kid. Right. Up until I was like 15 years old, it was all canned green beans. But now you can get fresh green beans year round at the grocery. You can get them fresh year round, which is crazy. You can get fresh blueberries in February. That is absurd to me. That's why at Thanksgiving casserole or green bean casserole became such a popular dish, because you can make it with canned green beans. You pour enough cream of mushroom soup and those crispy little onions on top, and you'll eat it. That's why it's so popular. We have access now through entrepreneurship and expansion of markets to fresh green beans year round. So much so that hardly any of us eats a canned green bean at all anymore. When we are thinking about these activities, we have to ask ourselves, who is making the decisions at each stage? Some people would say that society chooses to do a certain thing. But as an economist, we tend to prefer to say that only individuals choose. So recently, United Kingdom decided to leave the European Union. Right? Did the United Kingdom choose to leave the EU? Not exactly, because the society can't choose. Individuals inside the UK voted, and then representatives for those voters made decisions such that eventually the UK left the EU. But we would not say that society has chosen. Instead, we would say that individuals made decisions that led to a certain outcome. This way of thinking about things in economics is called methodological individualism. We tend to prefer to always dig down behind a social level of behavior to try to understand what is it that individuals have done such that this outcome has resulted. Instead, we say only individuals. Choose.